All right, good. Okay, good. So let's go ahead and get started. I know some people might arrive a little bit later, but that's on them. Y'all were here on time. So I'm really glad you're here. We're going to do a workshop tonight. My name is Erik Gross. I'm the co-founder of the Tech Academy. And that's me, a little bit younger, little less gray in my hair. Yeah, but hey, life happens, right? As I've already said, I'm a veteran. I was in the Navy for 6 years. I was a nuclear reactor operator and electronics technician. Very odd fact. At a certain point in the Navy, for 2 years actually, I was stationed on a submarine that was out in the desert in the middle of Idaho. It was in a big concrete pit, but it was a fully functioning submarine. The only thing it didn't have was a big screw at the back to push you through the water because it was just in a big tank that you could fill with water. They put it out in the middle of the desert in Idaho so that when you got done with your theoretical training, learning all the theory of nuclear engineering and electronics and all that stuff, that before they threw you out onto an actual operating ship, you could practice your skills on a real nuclear reactor that was out in the middle of the desert. So if things went crazy, some tumbleweeds and a few, grasshoppers were the only thing that got mutated. So thankfully, nothing ever happened while I was there. I just look this way naturally. I know I look like I might be a victim of a nuclear accident. All right, so I'm the co-founder of the Tech Academy, software developer boot camp company out of Portland, Oregon, and I'm really glad to be teaching tonight. I think you're going to get a lot out of this, and we're going to help you answer questions for yourself that are pretty important questions. So, a couple things to note here. We do have an assistant in the class. She's awesome. Regina is monitoring all the chat. She's there to answer questions for you, and she's just on top of it, right? So even if I'm talking away or, in a little bit of chat dialogue with someone, if there's something that you need to ask or whatever, throw it in the chat. Regina catches everything. Be nice. Every once in a while, it's so rare. Someone might be less than nice, and Regina will just boot you out of the class. Bye-bye. See ya. Okay, good. So speaking of chat, most people are using it already. Please make use of it. We're here to communicate with you. At various points, I might ask an open-ended question and see if anybody will respond in chat. I love to hear from you on these things. Okay. Here's the basic agenda. We'll have a short explanation of the Tech Academy, who and what we are. Then we'll do our workshop. The workshop, typically, the whole thing takes about an hour, hour and a half. Workshop is, a big chunk of that. Right at the end, time permitting, we'll have some Q&A. And even if there's not a time for all the questions to get answered, you'll have an opportunity to email in your questions. We'll go over some information about our boot camps. And we do have a free gift at the end, so please stick around to the end. All right, so what's a coding boot camp? Not everybody's heard of coding boot camps yet, right? They are intensive technology certification programs. They're designed to prepare people for entry-level positions in the tech industry. Typically, they last 3 to 6 months, and they focus on practical, modern skills. This is, they've been around for about a decade, and they're now a very firm, established element of the tech industry. I can tell you, when we started, people looked at us funny when we said we were, we ran a coding boot camp. And speaking of 10 years, we have 10 years of experience. We've been offering thorough, budget-friendly, flexible, and trusted coding boot camps for over a decade now. Our certification programs are cost-effective. They're self-paced online coding boot camps. They're tailored for beginners, people that have no prior technical or coding knowledge. And we'll talk a bit about that in some detail today in order to help you just answer some questions for yourself about technology. Finally, our certification programs, they cover in-demand skills for the tech industry. They're endorsed by stellar online reviews. And this is really cool. They're designed to fit around your personal schedule to prepare you for your tech career with a well-rounded toolkit. So that's who we are and what we do. I want to lay down some expectations from the start in terms of class expectations. What you can expect to get tonight is simple definitions for technical terms. You'll also get some technology-related concepts explained in plain English. Thank you very much. On this particular class, there's no coding. We do, in fact, run regular free coding classes. You can register for our next coding class on Meetup. We'll have links at the end of the class here. Actually, Regina, thank you. Regina just dropped in a link to the next free class right into chat. go ahead and grab that for a second. Just take a look at that link for our next class. I'll wait. We have a couple of really cool things coming up. All right. So let's go ahead and switch. I'm going to stop sharing for a second and switch over to our presentation, our workshop for the night. This is fun. I'm looking forward to this. So this presentation, this workshop is designed to help you answer a question. We can't answer this question for you. And the question is, are you smart enough to work in tech? Now, one of the most common misconceptions about the technology industry is that you have to be a nerd to learn coding. And while that may not be true, we'll explore this misconception and other misconceptions tonight. I do want to say that it is true that technology is not for everyone. I'm not going to sit here with some sort of like rainbows and unicorns message that anyone and everyone in the world should move into tech. You see that messaging sometimes. In my experience, it's not true. What I want to do tonight is give you enough data about what the technology industry is like, good, the bad, and the ugly, and what kind of person does well in it and what kind of person does not do well in it, so you can figure it out for yourself. And along the way, you're going to hopefully address certain misconceptions you might have a much better relationship and understanding to technology itself and the industry surrounding technology, and hopefully it'll help you. So, again, it is a common misconception that you have to be a nerd to learn coding, and that is 1,000% not true. Now, where does this come from? In the very early days of the computer industry, it really was a subject that was looked at as the province of math nerds and geeks and people that were very much into the minutia of detail and didn't have a real social gift. It's a bit of a joke, but the idea of some dude who lives in a basement and eats Cheetos and drinks Coke all night and codes until all hours of the night. There's a lot of nerdy things you see. I grew up in the 80s, and there were even like very popular movies that push this stereotype. But you do not have to be a nerd to learn coding. And there's another aspect of this that I really want to have you look at, which is that even if it were true at one point in time, if there's any negative impact that technology has had along the way over the years, I'd put forth the idea that in some ways, lack of diversity of types of personalities and socioeconomic backgrounds and histories and cultures in the tech industry has been to some degree responsible for when tech has not been as helpful as it should. We use technology to solve very real human problems. And the greater the degree of range of experience of people working on solving those problems, the better those solutions are going to be. We're addressing one aspect right now. You don't have to be a nerd to learn coding. You just have to be a good human who likes helping people and has an aptitude for this area, which we're going to cover more. All right. Here's another misconception. I still hear this all the time. It makes me want to bang my head against a wall. The misconception is that you have to be a math expert to do computer programming. This one is, for those of us in the industry, it makes us laugh almost hysterically because it's so 1,000,000% not true. And of course, some things can only be 100% not true. So the fact that I said 1,000,000% shows that I'm not good at math. Here's the truth is I was never really good at math. In fact, if you go back and look at my high school transcript, please don't. It was the worst subject for me. And yet, went into the military, learned mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, nuclear engineering, physics, heat transfer, fluid flow, chemistry, advanced mathematics, all this stuff. And after all of that, when I actually create programs for people, all I use 99.9% of the time is simple addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. That's it. I can count on one hand the number of times I've legitimately needed anything beyond basic addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication to do any programming. And this is an important point. The only times that more advanced math was needed, it was never needed because of the action of programming the computer. It was needed because a specific type of program we were creating was solving problems for real human beings where the problem to be solved required the use of advanced math. But the action of writing a program doesn't require advanced math at all. So I know I'm hammering on this one, but it's still so prevalent out there. In fact, in the early years when colleges were developing formal training in computer science, they didn't know where to put the classes. It was a brand new discipline. And they just happened to get dumped into the mathematics areas of a lot of colleges. Not because that's where they belonged, but because there wasn't a formal area for colleges and universities to put computer classes. Now you jump forward all these decades, and computer engineering and computer science are their own separate things at schools. But they just got dropped there for lack of another place to put them, not because they belonged there. All right, so here's the next one. Vocabulary. I'm going to ask a question. Let me pop up chat here. I'm really interested in answers here. Throw a note in chat if you've ever been studying something about computers and an explanation for a concept in computers was being presented to you as beginner friendly or introductory, and yet that explanation included words that you'd never seen before and were not defined. Give me a me in chat if you've been studying introductory level materials and they were presented as something for beginners, but they included words or symbols that you had no idea what those words or symbols were. Good. Me. All right. This whole area of technical words, this is a problem in any discipline, anything you're studying, especially for practical application, when you're studying something that you want to actually do something in the real world with. There are people that study things just to say they've studied them. I don't understand these people. If you're studying something, you want to do something with it, but it's a whole separate subject. But if you're studying something with the intent that you're actually going to do something with it, designer says combination is not explained. This is excellent. We'll get to that in a moment. If you're studying a subject with the intent that you're going to do something with it in the real world, in our experience, in now having trained thousands of people in technology, the number one thing that will stop you in your journey to both learn the material and, more importantly, apply it in the real world, the number one thing that's going to get in your way is lack of adequate definitions for the terms and symbols involved. It's a major problem. When you're studying programming, this whole area of technology, there's over 1,000 technical terms you're going to need to learn. A lot of material you find out there, you've already experienced this, many of you have, assumes that you know the terms. A lot of coding schools out there assume you know these terms. And they don't even try to define them. when you use them. Or when they seek to define a word for you, they include in the definition other words you don't know yet. And you're left now with the same problem, but it's even more complex, because now you really have two things you don't know about: the original one and the second word, which is included in the first one. So you're sitting there in more and more confusion. So what do there's a lot of ways to try to solve this, right? What we did is we wrote over 1,000 in-house definitions in plain English, which is not an easy accomplishment, let me tell you. Having done it, my co-founder and I wrote the vast majority of those 1,000 definitions. It's not an easy thing to do, but there's no excuse in my mind for the fact that it isn't being done in other areas. More importantly, the work we did in explaining these things in plain English allowed us to properly sequence them. What terms should you learn in what order to make the learning journey easy? Now, remember, the whole subject of this workshop is, am I smart enough to work in tech? The fact that there is a highly technical vocabulary to learn in here might be a thing for you to consider. And the reason for it is that learning technology, and especially learning coding, writing the programs that control the computer, it is like learning a new language. And it's made additionally a little more challenging because the words and symbols we use, they come from the English language, and they mean one thing in the written and spoken English language that we all use in regular life. And the same word or symbol can mean something subtly or completely different when applied to coding. And if that isn't clarified, it's very confusing for you as the learner and the programmer. So this is a factor to think with. Now, again, it's possible to write clear definitions for these words. We've done it. It's just difficult. Now, there's a big point here that I'm coming around to, which is that the difficulty in learning coding lies with the content, the teachers, and the teaching methodology, not with you. This means so much to us that when Jack and I, my co-founder and I, when we wrote our definitive work on this area, we called it "You Are Not Stupid." And yet it's very common, either overtly or quietly off to the side to imply, it's very common that people get the message that the problem is with them. They try to dive into coding. They find words and symbols that they don't understand. There's an assumption clearly on the creator of the material they're studying that they already know some stuff. They'll just give an offhand comment to, well, of course you already know about blah, blah, and blah. So the next thing is X. And you're like, I don't know what blah, blah, and blah are, right? You can make it really, you can take it personally and start to feel like the problem's with you. Oh man, if this is so fundamental that this authority in the area says, of course you already know about blah, blah, and blah, and I don't, man, the problem must be with me. And this, I'm passionate about this because it really bothers me. Bright, caring, dedicated, hardworking people trying to get into tech can legitimately start to think the problem is with them. And unfortunately, what you say to yourself sticks. And anything that plays into a tendency you might have to tell yourself bad things about you, I'm not a fan of. So again, the difficulty in learning coding lies with the content and teachers, not with you. We see this in a lot of different ways. In addition to assuming that you might actually know terms already, some schools out there assume that you know concepts. They assume you know it already. And this is an important thing. They skip fundamentals. Just last week, I heard about this on a podcast I was listening to about people who had broken into the tech industry. This guy went to a boot camp that had pre-work requirements before he was even allowed to start, that took weeks of work on his part. He's trying to handle, a family and work, and has to do about 3 to 4 weeks of work before he can even start the school. It drove me up a wall. Isn't that the job of the school? Here's another place we see it. We see this quite often with college degrees. Very often, the material you're studying for college degrees and computer science departments starts out with advanced topics, and they end with computer science fundamentals. We actually saw this a while ago. Look, I'm an Oregon Duck fan. I lived in Oregon a long time. I saw a quote-unquote boot camp they put out once about 2016 or 17 or something that I'm sorry. I'll go on record. It was a joke. Yes, it appeared to have all of the elements you might need, the things that a person might want to study in order to become, an entry-level technology worker. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that they laid all of these things out, and then at the very end of the program, almost like an afterthought, they had a tiny little module on the fundamentals of computers and computer science. At the end. So that means that people trying to go through that program are learning all these complex things without a proper underpinning of the fundamental principles involved in what is a computer? How does it work? How do you control it? What is coding? What are computer programs, and what are the fundamental elements of any computer program? What is data? None of these questions were answered until the end, after you've been working with all of them for 3 months. Drives me up a wall. The worst I ever saw was this. I bumped into a guy at my church probably, must be 9 or 10 years ago. Young kid, 21, 22. And he and I got to talking, and I found out he's been studying computer programming at that point. Now remember, he's about 21 or 22 years old. He'd been studying computer programming aggressively, both in middle school, high school, and now he was in his senior year of university. So at this point, it had been 11 years he'd been studying coding. And I'm super interested. It was right around the time I was actually starting the Tech Academy. So I was like, oh, wow, here's a person who's seen several different ways to attack this problem of learning to code, learning technology. Let me ask him about, some basics. I said, oh, okay, so I'm just curious, like in your college classes, what database technology do they teach? And his eyes glazed over. And he went, what? I'm like there's a few different approaches. You've got, databases, which, by the way, are organized collections of electronic data. That's all they are. Take a bunch of data. Maybe it's data about cars. Maybe it's data about students. Maybe it's data about products you have in the warehouse. Organize it and store it electronically. That's all a database is. And that way you can access that data later on. It's a pretty fundamental concept, right? In those 11 years, not once in middle school, high school, or 3.5 years into a university college program had they ever taught the basics of databases and how to use them. Now let's think about that for a minute. You're studying the creation of computer programs. Programs that are designed to solve very real human problems for very real humans. I would say conservatively, 95 to 98% of any computer program ever written relies upon access to stored data in a database. Think about how non-useful a computer program that couldn't access stored historical data or records about the products you're going to sell or records about student performance or whatever the domain is that you're making the software for, they couldn't actually even access any stored data about it. They could only ever be fed data each time you turn the computer program on, give it the data in a new unit of time, and then it'll work with it. It is absurd. Now, I thought that was a one-off. And then I've had occasion over the last 4.5 years to help design what are called early in career training programs for people in the technology industry. What does this mean? It means someone's a graduate of a computer science or information systems program at a modern, really cool university, and you bring them on board and you kind of need to teach them, well, okay, how does software really get made? What are the basics they kind of need to know? And it's astounding what fundamentals don't get taught. Now, this is not just going to be me ranting and raving about the modern educational system in universities and colleges. The fact is, there's amazing things that they got taught that I'm jealous of. They've got 4 years. They can do a deep dive into some really, really cool computing areas. But you'd be blown away by how often someone will graduate from a program and literally not be able to make a simple one-page website, to create it on their computer and get it actually deployed out on the internet. Utterly unable. It wasn't taught to them. So I'm saying all this to reinforce the central message on this slide. The difficulty in learning coding lies with the content and teachers, not you. If I could give you one takeaway from the entire presentation tonight to help you answer the question, am I smart enough to go into tech? That's the key piece of data. It's not you. Look at the content, look at the way it's being taught, and that's where you'll find why you might be running into difficulty. The last thing I want to say here is the sequencing of the data is extremely important when you're trying to learn programming, when you're trying to learn coding, when you're trying to learn anything about technology. What do I mean by that? Now, this is a subject or a concept that is relatively well known, usually very poorly implemented. And that is arrange the material you're going to learn in the easiest to hardest sequence. What are the easiest things to learn? But it's more than that. It's arrange it where you're putting in base fundamentals, the core principles that underlie the whole subject, and then slowly add the next very minor layer of complexity on top of that. That being solid for the student, then layer one tiny layer of complexity on top of that. How rapid that gradient is huge in the learning process, and it's something that gets missed in a lot of technology training systems. All right, that took a long time on that slide. I'm pretty passionate about it because the fact is you're not stupid. You're not. Look to the content and the teaching methodology if you're having trouble. Now, all that said, working in technology can be challenging. Let's say you do handle all of that. You learn your fundamentals. They're properly laid out in the right gradient. You have you get confident in actually applying them, and you get that first job. Working in tech can be challenging, and here's why. It would be virtually impossible in an educational environment, even where it contained a lot of practical lab work. It'd be virtually impossible to prepare someone for every situation they're going to encounter out in the real world. There's just no practical way to do it. So, assuming you have the fundamental principles laid in really, really well, and some moderate level of practical experience in the key areas of technology, the fact is, the most important thing right after that is learning how to think like an engineer. More precisely, knowing how to take a complex system or a complex problem, break it down to its individual constituent parts, see how they relate to each other, and start to sort out relative importances and methods of operation inside that complex system. How do you teach that? Well, here's what we did. The courses on our boot camps include many challenges, quite simple to begin with, but more and more complex. And these challenges are exercises where you as a student are tasked to complete actions you have not been taught. It almost seems rude. How offensive. You didn't teach me anything about this, and now you expect me to go out and solve it. Yeah, we do. Now, again, it's built on a very slow gradient. We take the training wheels off slowly, but we do it for a very specific reason. The life of someone in technology is a continual journey. More on this later, okay? It's a continual journey of encountering a problem that you or your team needs to solve, for which, the solution for which you only know about half of. You're looking at this problem laid out on a whiteboard or in a written document or in an email, and you're going, man, I got about half of that I kind of know how to attack it. The other half, I don't know. So, again, this workshop is this question: am I smart enough to work in tech? Hopefully, I've already given you a little bit of data for you to analyze whether or not the problem is with your intelligence or the material you're trying to study, how well it's put together. But there is a separate part, which is what kind of person does well in this environment. It's not maybe intelligence, but there is an attitude. The reason we arrange it this way is because the problems you are tasked with solving in technology, the problems you're trying to fix, relate to human endeavor in business, in relationships, in health. And those problems are complex. And more importantly, no two people are alike. No two relationships are alike. No two health situations are alike. No two business situations are alike. It means that as an engineer, as a technologist, as someone working in tech, you have to be able to embrace a problem for which an immediate solution is not instantly visible, where you're not sure yet of the exact things you're going to do to solve it. And that can be challenging. But I'll tell you what, ultimately, unbelievably rewarding when you and your team solve it. It feels fantastic. In order to do that, though, you have to be comfortable researching online and having communications with, conversations with your peers, trying to find solutions. You have to be okay with the fact that there's going to be every single day, you'll find out there's something you don't know. But if you've been properly prepared, and that's what we seek to do, you'll know how to solve that mystery, that confusion, that uncertainty. You'll know exactly how to approach it. But it's there. And I just want you to know that if you're considering going into tech. It's not, there's an exact procedure for everything you will ever find or do. Every conceivable situation, here's laid out an exact policy on what you're going to do. No, that does not exist. All right. Here's a related thing. You may have heard it said that developers get paid to Google things. It's absolutely true. Although, full confession time, increasingly, I find myself getting paid to chat GPT things, but that's a whole separate story. The point is this: no one has all the code of a programming language memorized. No one has all the answers memorized at all. What successful technologists do have is a solid understanding of the fundamental principles and the ability to ask the right question. Here's the thing that happens all the time. When people are learning to program, they're learning this new language. There's lots of programming languages you can use to enter instructions into the computer. They're learning this new language, and they actually think it's important to memorize all the words in that language and how they relate to each other. Why? Because the modern educational system hammers this into them. You have to memorize all this stuff. Absolute hogwash. Don't ever memorize it. Something that you can look up easily, never memorize it. Why utilize this amazing mind you have to memorize the exact words in some programming language when the fact is within 0.3 seconds in a Google search, you can have the answer like that? No. Much more valuable is to put your time and effort into gaining enough of an understanding of how to attack problems in a complex system, how to gain understanding of problems that have a variety of factors, a lot of moving parts, understand the principles of those systems, that's much more important. You can always look that other stuff up. So yeah, developers get paid to Google things. And it isn't just like, what's the exact words of this language? It's, hey, how did you solve this kind of problem I'm trying to solve? And go through and see how 100 other different people attacked solving that problem. So yeah, we get paid to Google things. But if you're not comfortable with that kind of a thing where you're like, I'm not quite sure, I'm going to reach out and just ask the interwebs what the answer might be, and knowing that you can't just automatically grab the answer without analyzing it yourself, well, that's an important thing for you to look at in terms of getting into tech, because it is very common in tech. And by the way, I mentioned ChatGPT. Artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, it is also a resource that can be used to help debug your code, to find problems in your computer programs and to ask questions. A big caution here for both Google and ChatGPT and similar tools. There's no substitute for you analyzing the results you get, whether it's from a Google search or a ChatGPT prompt. You'll make better use of those tools when you understand the fundamentals of computers and programming better. And I just want to make this point, though. Senior engineers, all day, every day, have to get paid to Google things, and they use artificial intelligence tools to help solve problems. But they do so knowing it's never a substitute for their own mind, their own analysis of the situation. As an example, you can use ChatGPT to help generate what a piece of code might look like to create a student record for a computer program you're building. And it might spit out a pretty good example in the language that you're using. But does it have enough code added into it to account for security vulnerabilities, for people that are trying to do nefarious things with your computer program, to break into your database? Sure, it might be adequate to create that new student record, but does it address security? Another question. There's actual styles to how people write their code, to how you lay out the different, characters in your computer programs. And different development teams, different teams of technologists, very often have to gain agreement in their small team of what the style is they're going to write their code in. There might be 3 or 4 ways you could write it. They all end up doing the same thing, but they look differently, and they have different, ease of readability for other people on your team. We might have agreements about that in our team. It's very common. It's called a coding style guide. Well, does the code that comes out of Google or out of ChatGPT conform to your style guide? Probably not. Which means if you just grab it, copy and paste it, dump it into your program, it might work. But then someone coming along later on to look through it is like, wait, everything else in this entire program is formatted one way, and this little chunk that Erik wrote is formatted completely differently. Erik, why did you do that? Sorry, I just copied it from ChatGPT. These things matter. Now, I'm going on at length about this one because, again, I'm painting a picture of what it's like to work in an area, computer programming, where 1, you don't have to memorize a bunch of stuff. 2, you do need to know how to ask the right questions to get good, useful answers. And 3, probably the most important, you need to develop over time the ability to analyze the answers you get from someone else to see how they apply to your given situation. Now, we endeavor to do that in our programs. We spend a lot of time on helping you learn how to think like an engineer. It's one of the most important things we can send graduates out with, is how to think with complex systems. When something is going wrong inside a complex system, how to rapidly isolate the exact area where the problem is. Like, these things matter. All right. This one's huge. This is all under the heading of, am I smart enough to work in tech? Okay. Imposter syndrome. Now, we could do an entire workshop in this topic alone, and we probably will at some point. But it's worth mentioning here. Imposter syndrome is a feeling of inadequacy or unpreparedness when trying to operate in a given domain or discipline. You feel like you're not prepared, and more importantly, you feel like you don't belong there. And the ultimate part of it is, with imposter syndrome, is a feeling that you are inevitably going to be found out, that you're in a place you don't belong, you're not prepared to be there, you're not bright enough or competent enough or able enough, and someone is going to find out probably within the next 5 minutes. This is not contained to technology. This feeling is one we've probably all felt. I would dare say it's pretty universal. But I've seen this keep good people out of tech more than almost any other factor. So I want to let you know, I want to let you in on a secret. I don't know that every senior engineer would say this. I think it's really, really important to hear. I feel this every day. I have been programming computers quite literally since I was 11 years old. Even before computers were out as a popular thing, because I'm old, right? We brought our first computer home in 1981. So yeah, I'm old. Even before computers were a thing, I was programming calculators to play a missile game where just with the little teeny display that all it shows you is a series of 9 numbers, in there was a program where you could simulate shooting missiles at each other from one side of a field to the other and adjusting the angle of the missile and how much explosive you put in. And then the program in that calculator would tell you whether you overshot or undershot the target. Like, I know you said you don't have to be a nerd to program, and it's true, but I'm a nerd. Proud of it. It would be impossible to really calculate how many different programs I've written and lines of code and all this stuff. I live and breathe this stuff. Jack and I have written 6 books about the subject. I consult with Fortune 5 companies on the subject. Jack and I co-founded a software developer bootcamp. This is not, okay, Erik's awesome. It's exactly the opposite. I am trying to tell you that this feeling is absolutely universal. You're operating in an area where the pressure is high. You're solving very important questions or problems for a company. You get paid a lot of money to do it. And as I said earlier, in any given project that you encounter, usually more than half of the things needed to solve that project, you don't know. In addition to that, there's so many things that could be known in technology that if you were to compare the amount of things you know with certainty to the number of things involved in technology that you don't know, it's laughable. It's so small. And this is true for me every day. And every senior engineer or technologist I've ever spoken to in depth about this has said the exact same thing. This never leaves. So how do you get anything done? This whole subject, this workshop tonight, yes, I put down that it's about, are you smart enough to get to work in tech? But that isn't really the question. The question is, what degree of certainty and confidence in yourself do you possess? What ability do you have to ignore this negative voice in your head and move forward with it anyway? To continually ignore the part that says, I don't belong here, I'm not adequate enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, to ignore it and just accept that someone did say, yes, come be part of our team. Someone said, yes, please accept this money to be an employee. Someone said, yes, come onto our project. And every single one of those people lives with this exact same thing that you experience. This feeling of like inadequacy, don't know enough. It's always there. Now, there are industries where this is not an issue, where there's an exact written policy on exactly what to do. Like there's industries that have been around for literally, hundreds or even thousands of years with very little change. Fine. That's not this industry. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, if every single person in the industry has this as a factor, you can safely eliminate it from how you think and how you make your decisions. And just dive in anyway. There's a whole presentation we're going to do in a little while on how to get hired in technology. And there's a lot of lessons in there. But one of the biggest ones is, why do people hire you in tech? Very rarely is it a technology related thing, an exact piece of tech you know. The more important concerns for a hiring manager and a team are: one, is this a nice person? Are they bright? Are they really interested and eager to learn new things? Do they work well with others? Are they willing to experience the continual process of being wrong over and over and over again while they're trying to solve a problem and suddenly being right? Are they willing to experience that? That's what they care about. Because we know from decades of experience in the tech industry, those are the hallmarks of a successful developer. Not how bright they are and how many languages they know, whether they know this technology or that program or whatever. Those are of minor importance. Who you are and your attitude towards attacking complex problems, towards collaborating with others, like being a nice person who's seeking to solve problems and willing to work hard, those matter. All right. Again, I said I could do an entire workshop on this topic. I didn't mean for this to be it, but I don't want anybody with any impulse or question about, could tech be right for me, to have this be the thing that stops them. Especially since I've told you now, every senior technologist bumps up against imposter syndrome. It was really wild. Look, this is about 2012. I was working with a security company. They had a really cool, set of programs and technology that would help control access to really secure military installations. It was a really cool domain to work in. The reason I'm telling you this is that I've worked with hundreds or thousands of technologists over my career. And even now, 12 years later, I get chills when I think about working with this one person there named Chris. I'm not always the smartest person in the room, but you ever have that feeling where you're sitting with somebody and you're like, wow, they're smart. Like, it's stunning. You're like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do. Am I in the wrong room? That's how Chris was. And gracious, kind, incredible teacher. Like, I was blown away, right? And I got to know this guy over the 3 or 4 months I was working on that contract. And guess what? He had a mentor. And in my mind, when he told me that, I'm like, dude, you could mentor me and anybody I know. So I was curious, like, why? He says, what do you mean, why? There's always things you don't know. And even though I'd been doing this for years, it hit me like a gut punch. I had so much respect for this person. And he's just sitting here telling me, yeah, of course, there's so many things I don't know. And even though I'd learned that lesson before, and I would continue to learn it over time, I always look back on that because that was an exceptional person, an exceptional technologist, and he struggles with this stuff all the time. So it's universal. Never let this imposter syndrome thing stop you at all. All right. So this all comes together under the heading of persistence, which is, it's run like a thread through everything I've said. Okay. When you're trying to solve a coding problem, whether it's working as part of a team, on a whiteboard, sitting down, writing the actual program, it is inevitable that you're going to hit a wall. I kind of briefly described it before. I said, what do hiring managers look for? And I described this characteristic where like someone who's willing to be wrong over and over and over again while they're seeking to solve a problem, and then take great joy when, bam, they finally solved it. I'm not kidding about that. The chances that the first bit of code you write to solve any one particular problem, unless it's a problem you've solved over and over and over and over again, the chances of you getting it right the first time out of the gate are very low. This is true whether you're new in the industry or you've got decades of experience, I'm telling you. So, how do you handle the fact that the practice of doing technology, of writing and testing and deploying really good programs requires a great deal of persistence? Here's some practical things that you need to know if you're considering going into this industry. You can always research online. You don't have to memorize it all yourself or be upset that you don't know the answers. It's also very important to just sometimes get up and walk away. Walk away from the problem. Literally take a walk. Have a cup of coffee. Watch something mindless on TV. Listen to a podcast. Read a fiction book. Just walk away from the problem, figuratively or literally. But ultimately, you are in charge, and this is true of all life, but we're talking about characteristics of working in technology. You're in charge of your persistence. About you're going to get knocked down, think you had the right solution for something, wrote it up, tested it, and it didn't work. You're going to get knocked down. And it's you and only you who can decide to stand up and walk again. And if you have that inside you, if you've proven to yourself in other areas that that is part of your character, that alone makes you a good fit for technology. So again, the title of the workshop is, "Are you smart enough to work in tech?" I'm hoping you're seeing that that's not really the question. It's a matter of your attitude, how you view yourself. These things are equally, if not more important than your intelligence. Why though? Well, for a lot of people, the joy of pushing through, of the fail, oh my gosh, win, that is worth it to some people. I know it is for me. And those successful students we have, they'll share that, like what that feeling was like when they tried this solution and it didn't work, and that solution didn't work, and then looked this up on the internet and tried it and it didn't work, and went back to the materials and tried it and it didn't work, and then finally it worked. I had this just the other day with a friend of mine that I'm helping, and he says he finally solved it. It was about 10:30 at night. Kids were already asleep. Wife's in bed in the other room. He says, "Eric, I had to try so hard not to yell out loud, but I did pump my arms in the air and yell very quietly, 'Yes!' when he solved it." If that's part of who you are in other areas, it'll serve you in good stead in tech. But you better know that is part of being a technologist. The point is, the ability to persist and research for solutions is more important than being a super genius. There's always somebody smarter. There's always somebody smarter. That's not what gets you ahead in this industry. Again, as long as you can read, write, and perform basic math, you can learn entry-level technology skills. You can prepare for a career in the tech sector. We know this because this is what we do all the time on our coding boot camps. So that's information about, are you smart enough? Let's jump into the next spot here. I've been going on a rant, and I know it, and I have not been able to look at whether there's any Q&A here. I apologize. So let's look at chat here and see what we got. All right. Is there any, Regina, is there any burning questions?
I didn't see anything, but if you guys have any questions, please put it in the chat.
Nathan says we'll be doing intro to Python course. Yeah, we're going to give you a link here to our free courses shortly. And when you look through that schedule, we're doing a Python one pretty soon. Okay, good. So while there may not be questions about what I've said already, has anybody got an attitude or piece of data they've encountered when they've looked into the technology area that made you go, oh, maybe tech isn't for me because of blank? Things that maybe have made you say that maybe technology isn't the right fit for me, or aspects of the industry, aspects of the industry that didn't really sound appealing to you. Shob, okay. Okay, good. Now, I love this. This is a very specific like observation or question, but it can relate to technology in general. He says this is Nathan, who prior military in the Air Force did geospatial work. Geospatial is just being able to determine where exactly you are on the planet. So it sounds like at a certain point in the past, he was doing some work with aeronautical charting, right? Aeronautical meaning flying planes around in the sky, charting where they are relative to the surface of the earth and the sky. Is that pretty correct, Nathan? And what he said was the Python, good. The Python was a bit over my head. Okay, so I'm really glad you brought this up. So let's look at this for a second, folks. This is something that can help you in your learning journey if you're seeking to get into tech. And Nathan, I know this isn't 100% the question you were asking, but it's a brilliant observation. Let's look at the two areas that Nathan had to know really, really well to make this journey go well. There's this whole thing about geospatial measurements, especially as it applies to things that can leave the planet's surface. That's a whole body of technology and best practices and its own complicated math and formulae, and like there's a lot to know about that. And then there's Python, a computer programming language that you can use to build tools that work in that domain of geospatial tracking. Those are two different technical subjects, but each of them has something in common, something that every technical subject has, which is for each of them, if the fundamentals are not laid down very, very, very well, then adding in complexity will be extremely challenging for you as a learner. Why do I bring this up? Because I see this quite often when people are trying to study on their own in tech. So I'm going to share with you how I approach learning new technologies. And this is an approach you can use. It's the approach we use in the school. There's a real strong tendency or like urge to find or to have a problem you're trying to solve with technology that you don't know everything about that problem yet. Let's get concrete. Let's say you have this sort of vague requirement or idea that there's a volunteer group that you are part of, that it might be really useful to have some sort of computer program that would help keep track of all the different projects that this volunteer group is working on and who the people are that are involved and, how to plan out things that they're going to do. Like, you just know, God, it'd be really good if we had a website for that or some kind of piece of software. In other words, you at least know the activity you're thinking with, and you've got an idea that isn't fully fleshed out of something of use that could be made. But you've got more work to do in that in terms of fully understanding the problem. You haven't done it yet. You just know there's vaguely a problem that could be solved. And you're like, oh, well, I've been wanting to learn to code for a long time. I looked online and I found out JavaScript. JavaScript is a really popular language. Why don't I learn JavaScript by making this software for my volunteer group? On the surface, it sounds like a pretty smart idea. In practice, it's a nightmare. So here's the right sequence. Totally ignore that real world problem you're trying to solve right now and take upon your shoulders the mission of simply learning the fundamentals of the new technology all by themselves. Don't jump into, oh, I have this real world problem I have to solve. Let me learn the language through solving that problem. You've got two areas that are both full of confusion, and you're trying to solve them both at once. It never goes well. First, learn the fundamentals of this new technology, in this case, JavaScript. And then build a simple project in that language that may or may not be related to the thing you're trying to solve in the real world. You want to get through the process of building a thing, a simple to-do list application, a simple website, a simple game, but build the whole thing. And generally, I recommend doing it with a very guided tour approach where someone lays out, here's exactly what to do. At that point, you know the fundamentals of the technology, in this case, JavaScript. You've used it to build something through a relatively guided, curated experience, but you've built it and it's right there. You have a computer program in front of you that you built yourself, even if it was a very guided tour. Now you have enough confusion sorted out about the area of JavaScript to turn and go, okay, what exactly am I trying to solve over here for my volunteer group? How can I better define the problem? Document all that, and then build something with JavaScript for it. So I know that wasn't even 100% the question you were going for. You didn't even ask a question here, but I just think I see this mistake both on the part of the learner, but more often on the part of the trainer, the educator, where they're trying to teach too many things all at once. I can tell you about a specific example that drives me up the wall, but I'd just be throwing out a bunch of misunderstood words. But we see this quite commonly. You go to some sort of like learning resource and it says, learn X. Learn the basics of X, whatever it is, right? And then when you dive deep as a trained technologist and educator, when you dive deep into it, you see they're actually trying to teach you 5 or 6 or 7 things all at once under the umbrella of learn X. They don't tell you about Y and Z and 1, 2, 3 that they're teaching at the same time. No. One thing at a time, in the right order, sorts it out. Okay, good. Let's look here. I want to make sure there are. Afraid my skills won't be transferable. Auntie, I'm so glad you said. Again, I could do a workshop of great length on a lot of these aspects. This is actually super important, folks. There's 2 broad demographics we see coming into our boot camp over the last decade, because it's been a decade. Roughly, there's a younger demographic that has not spent very much time out in the workforce. 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, that kind of age group, okay? And if they have spent a little bit of time in the workforce, usually it's not in a, again, these are generalities, so I'm not trying to be insulting. It's not in a professional environment or whatever. That's our first segment. Then there's career transition folks, people who've been out in some professional career of some sort or another for 5, 10, 20, 30 years, and they want to make a switch into technology. You want to know who on average makes more money when they graduate? It's those older folks that already have a bunch of experience. And here's why. Auntie, it's a great question. She said, I'm afraid my skills won't be transferable. I'm afraid my skills won't be transferable. Probably they won't. How often do you think I use my skills of operating a nuclear reactor in my day-to-day coding job? Not, if I do, I'm doing something very wrong, and probably the Department of Energy is going to come talk to me. I'm being silly, but here's the thing. It isn't the skills that transfer. It isn't hard skills that transfer. It's your experience in what it takes to work with a team, to understand a problem, and work together in collaboration to fix it that transfers over. Now, you can call that a skill if you want. But if your skill is in, brewing, you worked as a brewmaster at, a beer place, yeah, that skill isn't going to work, or is going to transfer over. What does transfer over? Guess what? The things I was telling you about that hiring managers care about more than your technology skills. Ability and willingness to learn, ability to be wrong over and over again until you're right, ability to work and collaborate well with others, ability to compromise, ability to understand the needs of the business and relate those to the work you do. These things matter, and they matter a lot. So those are transferable. I hope that helps. Okay. Jeremy says, truck driver for 14 years, professionalism. Absolutely. You stick with that industry, 14 years in trucking, you've seen irresponsible, shouldn't even be allowed behind the wheel idiots come and go. But I'll tell you, Jeremy, confirm this for me. The people that have been doing that for a decade are professional, disciplined. They take care of their health. They take care of their financial responsibilities. Are these things, they know how to compromise and work together to accomplish an overall goal. Is that pretty accurate, Jeremy? These are the things that transfer over. That was a great question. All right, I could go on. I love talking with you guys. Thank you so much. I see a lot of stuff in the chat. If there's a question that I didn't fully answer, you'll have an opportunity here in a minute to send in an email. Go ahead and send me anything you want. They all get forwarded to me. I will be glad to answer you. You're welcome, Nathan. Thank you. That was a great point. All right, now please stick around for your free gift. It's a nice gift. We're actually going to send it to your house. It's pretty cool. Now, I said earlier, I've mentioned the Tech Academy, obviously been peppered throughout my presentation. It's hard not to talk about it because, look, it's the thing that Jack and I co-founded a decade ago, and we're the people putting the class on. This is not meant to be some gnarly, obnoxious sales presentation about the school. I hope I've delivered value to you today. For those of you who are looking at this and going, oh, man, okay, I got that data about the industry, about the fact that it isn't me, it's training materials, approach, and methodology, the common attitudes of the successful with tenacity, persistence. You're getting a feeling for what it's like. If that's you, this next part is for you. We have 12 online boot camps. They cover a wide range of technology subjects. You can see them on the screen here. Artificial intelligence, computer programming, website development, cybersecurity, which is super popular right now for a reason, design, data science, video game development, which is sort of popular, mobile app development. You can see all the selections here. In fact, we have more certification programs than any other coding boot camp on earth. And these boot camps are, one, they're self-paced, but they're also instructor supported. You can move at your own pace and still get help from instructors, which is great. They're flexible. Students can set their own schedule, and you can enroll 365 days a year. Our content is well-rounded, and it's very in-depth. And our boot camps are affordable. They're priced under the national average. All of our programs include job placement training and job placement assistance. And most importantly, I think we've covered this a lot tonight, our programs are designed for absolute beginners. No prior technology knowledge or experience is required, so you don't have to be a nerd to get through our programs. We consistently land on every major coding bootcamp award that's out there. They award best coding bootcamp awards. We're always on those lists, and we're really proud about those. And we're very proud of this. Our average review rating across all major bootcamp review websites. It's 4.8 out of 5 stars. And that's based on student and graduate feedback. They have to fill that out. And I love that that's what they say about us. So here's a question. I told you a lot of good and bad about working in technology. Why would you consider even working in tech? Well, I'll tell you one thing. The work-life balance is really good in tech. Look, not always. Every company's got its ups and downs and times that crunch time and the times that are quieter. But I've worked in a lot of different industries. Ask me sometime to tell you about my time spent selling sunglasses on the roadside in Australia. I've worked in a lot of different industries, okay? Technology has the best work-life balance of any industry I know. And it's got a real strong remote work possibility, which is kind of cool. Not everybody wants that. I've worked remote now for many years. I love it. But here's the other thing, and I think you probably caught a little bit of an image of this in the talk tonight. It is a very creative industry. Yes, it's a very precise industry. You're writing code and it has to be formatted exactly correctly and all that kind of stuff. Computers are very literal machines, and they're machines. You might not think, oh, it's creative. But the fact is, there's 100 different ways to solve any one particular problem you're trying to solve with technology. And you get to decide which one. Which way do you solve it? You get to do that in collaboration with other people. There's creativity involved. It's actually a lot of fun. And there's a lot of personal pride in your work when you get it right. And finally, it is a stable industry. The news media will try to scare you. I don't know if you noticed this. If you pay attention to history, that's what the news media has done in every sector of society for hundreds of years. They love to scare you. Isn't that nice of them? We could have a whole presentation on this. I've been reading for decades about the imminent demise of the computer programming career. I've been reading it since I was 14 years old. Not only has it never come true, but the industry grows and grows and grows and grows. Every single time I've looked at job forecasts, which I look at every year, we are always needing more talent. There's more jobs than available talent. And it pays well, and you get regular increases in pay. So these are some factors. Again, I talked about some of the challenges in it. There's some really good things. There are some specific barriers to entry when you're considering doing a boot camp, because there's 3 routes into tech: college and university, boot camps, and self-study. If you look at a boot camp, the tuition cost, it's in the thousands of dollars. It's expensive. It's intensive training for 3 to 6 months. Now, what we've done to try to handle that is we have multiple financing options, including a big upfront discount if you pay all your tuition up front. We have monthly payment options for people that have no credit or bad credit. We have a tuition option for everyone and any financial condition. But the fact is, and Jeremy, you're awesome. Jeremy just said this. It's an investment in yourself. And it's true. Look, I know I'm passionate about this, and I know that perhaps some of you have been, maybe it drove you away with how passionate I am about it. I'm sorry. It's just how I feel about this stuff, okay? But I'm going to be very direct. The most valuable asset you will ever possess is your own personal certainty and confidence in yourself and your ability to make things go right in your life. Now, I'm not saying technology is the ultimate solution to all those things. I'm not saying that at all. But I am telling you that if this is your chosen career and you get good and competent at it and are willing to work hard through that, throughout a career, your personal certainty and your ability to always get a job, always provide well for yourself and your loved ones can become very, very high. I never, ever worry about my ability to get a job in tech. Never. My confidence in myself is very, very high. And that isn't because I'm an arrogant person. In fact, my friends will hopefully tell you I'm not. I'm a big old dork, and I very rarely toot my own horn. But I am certain in myself. And part of that is because of the foundational knowledge I have. And that's what we impart to you on these programs. It's truly an investment in yourself. All right. Now, This one cannot be avoided. Getting through a boot camp takes time. There is a lot to learn. No, you don't have to memorize all of it. We kind of talked about that tonight, but there is a lot to learn. And there's a lot of practical work that needs to be done. And frankly, some of the things you need to learn, you can only learn by doing and getting it wrong 5 times and going, I thought I did it right. And then finally fixing it and going, yay. But you have to take the time to do that. So some of the approaches we see out there to handling the time factor is, well, let's just batch a bunch of students together and have them go through boot camps as a cohort. Some boot camps out there require you to be in person so they can control that time with the material kind of thing. We don't do that. You can do our programs online. You can choose your own study schedule. Yes, put in an adequate amount so you can get through the program, which means you can do part-time study if that's what you have going on. And all that ultimately means is that you can study concurrent to holding a job or going to a regular school. Now, finally, we've talked about this a lot. It's this technical interest and ability. Yes, you've got to have some technical interest or ability to get into the industry. But I hope you see that it's not nearly as high as you might think, right? Again, a lot of the problem has to do with the technology education materials being difficult, or the material being written by educators who assume too much prior knowledge. With our programs, you don't have to be a nerd. You don't need any technical background to enroll. We've covered that in detail tonight. All right. So for those of you who had any part of what we went over tonight resonate with you internally, I just have some questions for you. Are you working a dead-end job? Or are you unemployed? Do you have a strong desire to work from home? Does having more time with your loved ones matter to you? Ultimately, the question I have is it time for a career change? There's a lot of things you could do if that's true for you. The Tech Academy is a completely viable solution for all of those. We are career change experts. At this point, we have gotten thousands and thousands of people into tech. Why? Because we are here to be a bridge into technology. We're here to provide a route into tech for everyone. At this point, it's over a decade of helping people break into tech. And how well do they do? Well, most of our graduates in their first roles average around $30 an hour. That's $60,000 a year. Now, not everyone makes that high. Not everyone, like a lot of people do higher. A lot of people do lower. That's the average. But the thing is, if you apply yourself, in a year or so, you're making more. It doesn't take long to be breaking 6 figures. The average wage in the industry now is about $120,000 in America. It's the average wage for a developer. It's pretty good. We've graduated, like I said, over 1,000 people. And where do they work? Well, look, this is another thing. Everybody thinks you need to work in one of these big giant companies like Google or Facebook or Apple or Netflix or whatever. Yeah, we've gotten people placed there. Disney, right? But we've gotten tons of people placed at just regular jobs. I know people that work at HVAC companies and handle all their internal software. People that work in healthcare, in banking, and insurance, and all these areas, small businesses all the way to the big guys. We've gotten people working at all of them. Any decent-sized company needs technology help. So, as a reminder, we are an open enrollment system. You can start anytime. I encourage you to enroll now. How do you do that? You go to the special Erik with a K link. Regina's just dropped that into chat. That's the Erik with a K link. Why with a K? Because that's how the Scandinavians spelled it. This silly C, not legitimate. Erik with a K. All right. Now, when you go here, you fill out a very, very simple form. We don't spam you with anything. Right after the form is a series of steps that are all about the Tech Academy. Videos, articles. They'll answer all your questions. And there's even an optional step in there to book a call with our admissions personnel who can answer any questions you have. The point is, yeah, it's great if some of this resonated with you. We want you to make a very informed decision. So after the event, complete the steps in here. So again, fill this form out now. I'll wait a moment. And by the way, if you go to that URL, you go to that link and you see a login screen, it just means you've already got an account with us. And you can see how to do your password at the bottom. I'm going to take a sip. I've been drinking a lot. Or been drinking a lot. I've been talking a lot. I've been drinking a lot. Welcome to Erik's Whiskey Coding Hour. That'd be great. I would never do this, but can you imagine a coding class? It was live streamed where the coder just drinks every time he has a bug in his code or whatever. That's really not a good idea. I'm not a big drinker, by the way, but I do want to share something funny. Like most of America, my wife and I have been watching Suits. I think it was the most viewed program on Netflix last year. I'd already seen it. My wife had never seen it. And we invented a drinking game. Now, we never really did it, but here's the drinking game. Because it's a show about the law, lawyers, all that, right? We decided we would drink every time someone walks into another lawyer's office with a binder of material. And inside that material is some lawsuit they're going to file that's going to solve the whole problem. Some very detailed legal solution to a highly complex problem. And they walk in, they hand the binder to the other lawyer and says, wait till they see this or some other obnoxious thing. And the lawyer will do the following. They'll open up this folder. They'll read it for no more than 2 seconds and like, this is amazing. How did you think of this? My wife and I die every time it happens because there's no way they understood all of it. So we decided every time that happens, we're going to drink. And we didn't really do it because we're not drinkers, but I love inventing silly drinking games like that. All right, let's go and move on. I mentioned free gifts. They're coming. Now, this isn't a gift, but it's actually a really, really cool opportunity. Since our graduates love us, one of the biggest sources of enrollments for us over the years has been referrals. So for years, we have had a commission program where if you refer someone to our school, we'll pay you a 5% commission. That's not just for our graduates. It's for anyone. It's for you. So if you've got someone you think we should be talking to about this school where they'd be a really good fit, you can tell us about them. We'll keep track of it and we'll pay you a commission if they enroll. In just a moment, I'm going to give you an email address to send in to get your free gift. Just include the name and contact information of any referral. We will register that for you. We keep really good administration on this, and we will send you a commission check. All right. I mentioned earlier that Jack and I have written 7 books. We have, including 3 Learn Coding Basics in Hours books. We've got a coding books for kids and young adults. We have a technology basics dictionary. Remember, I talked about the importance of clear, simple definitions. We put them all in a book. We have a project management handbook, and we even have You Are Not Stupid. I referred to this earlier. You Are Not Stupid is basically a written version of the first and most important course on all of our boot camps. It's called the Computer Basics course. It removes all mystery from computers and technology. It helps lay in that foundation that I talked about. And it's got all modern technology terms and concepts defined, and even a history of technology that shows you how we arrived where we're at today. So that's You Are Not Stupid. I am, I believe, justifiably proud of that. Jack and I put a lot of work into that book. So I mentioned a free gift. Here we go. Free gift. This is our project management handbook. Look, it's one thing to learn how to program, how to make a computer program. Managing the actual process of doing so with complex requirements from the business and teams of people that may not even be working in the same office and people that are paying for marketing and arranging, like there's a lot of moving parts. How do you run this? How do you make software? We wrote all about that in our free, in this project management handbook, and it describes everything about the business of making software. It's pretty educational. We hadn't found anything like this that could explain it in simple terms, so we made it. So for the US only, you can have a free copy of this mailed to your house. Just look at that email. I believe that Regina dropped into the chat. If you'll email us there right now with your full name, and please put your mailing address. We've had people email in include their name, but not include an address. And we're actually going to send you a book. So we need your mailing address, right? Go ahead and do that right now, and we will send you a free copy of our book. I'll pause a moment for anybody who wants to grab that email. Shoaib, I'll need you to email that information to us, okay? Grab that email, books@learncodinganywhere.com, and send us that same information in the email. We'll send out to you as long as it's a U.S. address. Oh, yeah. We can't do Canada, Shoaib. I'm sorry. All right. So I mentioned earlier we're going to get you links. All of our Tech Academy links are in one location. It makes it really easy. Regina just dropped that location into chat. This is our link tree. Go there now and you'll see everything I'm talking about here. You'll see links to our free educational YouTube video playlist, our books and dictionary, our upcoming meetups. If you want to attend more classes, you'll find them there, the links to that, and all of our social media accounts. Please follow us on social media. Invite your friends to our future meetups. And if you'd like your own copy of You Are Not Stupid, you can win one. If you'll share the next event link to the next event on social media, and if you'll tag the school in that post, you'll be entered to win a copy of You Are Not Stupid. We give one out a week, and we'd love for you to win it. Again, if you follow our link tree, find the link for our next class, and share that link online and tag us, you can win a copy of You Are Not Stupid. We'll send it right to your house. All right. Thank you very, 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 very much for attending and for listening to me rant about something I'm clearly way too passionate about, right? If you filled out the form, here's the link, right? Right following this, be sure to go through the additional steps that you'll see after that form. I will see you at our next event. Please join us for these. I love doing them. And thank you, Nathan. I appreciate that. Yeah, I love doing this. I just love our industry. And if I can help really great people break into the industry, then I feel good about myself.